welcome back to Scooping Poop with Vivian and also Malem. He says hi. So this is Malem. He hates people. He is my juvenile Halmahera Blue Tongue Skink. And so he is with me today because today we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of keeping blue tongue skink. So the first thing I want to mention is that this video is specifically talking about my blue tongue skink, which is a Halmahera blue tongue skink. And now, in a lot of people's opinions, Halmaheras are typically the most picky / the most difficult out of all the blue tongue skinks to care for, mostly because they have extremely high humidity requirements. Another thing with Halmaheras that you have to know is that the majority of them are wild caught. I was lucky enough that mine was captive born but not captive bred, meaning that his parents were caught from the wild. So that means that they have not been bred in order to accept people, and so that their personalities won't always be super duper loving, unlike your typical northern blue tongue skink. But regardless, I still think that they're amazing pets, so today we're going to go over some pros and cons of Halmahera blue tongue skinks. So the first pro that I have is that they're very, very low maintenance, meaning that you don't have to check on them every single day, and they do not require extremely extensive care, unlike my bunnies. So what I personally mean by low maintenance as a reptile owner is that they do not necessarily require very interactive daily care. So an example of what I mean by hands-on care would be, going in and feeding my bearded dragon. That'll be a task that I'll have to do pretty much every day, and so that's something that makes their maintenance a little bit more difficult. Now with my blue tongue skink, I do not have to feed him every day. He eats a few times a week, and he's generally pretty cool about finishing all his food and being a good boy. Now, in regards to cleaning their enclosure, that also does not have to be daily. If I see some poop, I'll scoop it up because here I am just scooping. Because he has a semi-bioactive kind of enclosure, he has some springtails that live in his tank. It can help break down any of the waste and excess sheds or anything that ends up in the substrate, so that it makes it a lot easier for me to clean everything out. Now, when it comes to actual full-on cage cleanings, I really only have to do that once a month or even less than that. Now, the second pro to owning blue tongue skinks is that they are amazing eaters. So we all know as reptile owners, we don't always get these super duper hands-on type of interaction when it comes to our reptiles, unlike, bunnies where you can play with them all day, or rats or cats or dogs. But instead, a huge part of the bonding process is feeding them, and it's super duper fun to feed reptiles. Now, blue tongue skinks, what I mean by being awesome eaters is the fact that they are omnivores, meaning that they can eat both plant and animal matter. They're also scavengers, meaning that in the wild, they'll go around finding food on the floor and they'll eat it. So they're typically not very picky at all. If you guys like those clips, be sure to check out my video on feeding all of my animals, and I will have an icon up there for you to click. Another thing with blue tongue skinks that makes them really easy is that you don't always have to make a very complex meal by yourself, because with the meat portion, a very easy way to give them the proper protein is to actually use dog food or cat food. So basically anything you can find in your refrigerator that is okay and safe for blue tongue skinks, you can just mix it up into a concoction, supplement it with some vitamins, and bam, dinner. And the way they eat, I just can't get over how cute they look. So the third pro I have about blue tongue skinks is the fact that they are super hardy and basically impossible to kill. I know that sounds really bad, but it means that they're very forgiving reptiles. So if you do make some kind of mistake in your care, it's really easy to fix it and they won't immediately die, unlike some certain reptiles that have very picky requirements, such as chameleons. Instead, blue tongue skinks are incredibly tolerant of neglect, and I'm not saying that blue tongue skinks should be neglected. In fact, every single skink out there should deserve love and happiness, but I'm saying that skinks have an incredible ability to survive through some of the worst care I've seen. But basically that means that if you are a beginner, if you do make some mistakes unintentionally, your skink is probably going to be forgiving, and most likely your skink will be able to make it and everything will be good. Sorry, I'm not sure. So going off of what I said, blue tongue skinks will rarely ever get sick. The only times that you have to really worry about them getting sick is when you first get them, because they could have parasites. Now, I was lucky enough that Malem didn't have any parasites, considering the fact that his parents were wild caught. But if they do have parasites, a quick visit to the vet will probably solve that, and you don't have to worry too much about it. However, it is important to always keep up with the health of your blue tongue skink, and just to make sure you're not falling ignorant to any symptoms of illness, because like most reptiles, they can hide illnesses really well. So as long as you're making sure that they seem healthy and reacting perfectly fine, they honestly don't get sick super often, and you don't have to worry too much about them. So these are the 3 main pros I have about blue tongue skinks, but now I'll move on to the cons. So the first con is their price. Well, typically, you can't just go into a pet store and immediately find a blue tongue skink. You usually have to go to a reptile convention or go to a specific breeder. Now, the price range of blue tongue skinks can definitely range. It ranges around from $200 to over $1,000, and it depends on what kind of skink you're getting. Mine is a Halmahera, like I mentioned before, and since his parents were wild caught, he wasn't marked at a super high price because of the fact that a breeder didn't have to work and make sure that all the genetics are perfect. So there wasn't so much work going into crafting him. So he was $250 as a baby Halmahera skink. Now, the price, again, really depends. Some Nordens can go up over $1,000 depending on how big they are, and also depending on their genetics and all of that. But honestly, I say if you want a blue tongue skink, definitely pay a more expensive price to get a captive bred individual, and make sure you know about their genetics. With Malem here, it was kind of a desperate situation because literally nobody around me freaking had blue tongue skinks, and this one person showed up and was like, here. I was like, okay, I'll take it. But regardless, in the future, if I ever was going to get a blue tongue skink again, I'll probably pay a lot more money just to make sure I know their genetic info and also know their background. Now, the second con I want to talk about is probably something that applies more to me and my personal situation, but it's the fact that Malem has freaking giant claws. So he's absolutely tiny, meaning that his feet are so small that it's really hard to cut down his nails or file them. And so I have things in this enclosure, such as rocks that he has to climb over to hopefully buff them down a bit. But the thing is that they are so sharp, and every single time I get him out, my hands are covered in scratches, and it's very annoying. Now, this is not a problem that everybody has, because if your blue tongue skink has hands that are slightly bigger, you could probably cut their nails a lot easier. But Malem here has tiny little hands, and so that basically means that it's almost impossible to cut his nails without hurting him or making him incredibly pissed. So it can be really painful to hold him sometimes, which is kind of unfortunate because I do have to take him out in order to feed him. So that is really one of the major things I wanted to talk about, is the fact that whenever I hold him, I get injured mildly. Now, the third con I want to talk about, again, specifically applies to the Indonesian species, specifically the Halmahera. So we know that northern blue tongue skinks require generally pretty low humidity, while the Indonesian types, they need a lot higher humidity levels. So with the majority of the Indonesian types, you'll need around 60 to 70-ish%, but with Halmaheras, it spikes in numbers and you need to keep it above 80% at all times, meaning that I have to buy a fogger thing that blows mist into the tank, so keeps it nice and juicy. But it's really annoying because I have to fill up the fogger every single day, and then I have to reach to the top shelf. It's kind of just an extra action I have to take in order to make sure he's completely healthy. When the humidity does drop, they can get irritation around their eyes, and they can have shedding issues and also respiratory issues. So a great way to prevent them from getting sick is obviously keeping their humidity up and at the appropriate level. Okay, so the very last con I want to talk about regarding the majority of blue tongue skinks, I think, because when I talked to other owners about their other types of subspecies, they had a very similar response, is the fact that blue tongue skinks aren't a very visual pet, as in you can't just sit there and watch your tank as if it's a fish tank and look at all the cute things they're doing, because most of the time they're buried underground. I mean, I don't really mind, but most of the time you're not going to be able to see your skink. And I know this sounds horrible, but the majority of interactions I have with Malem is when I take him out to feed him, and occasionally he'll peep his head up and bask, and it's an absolute miracle. It's Jesus has But let's say we're comparing a blue tongue skink to a bearded dragon. Bearded dragons obviously shouldn't have loose substrate, at least for most people. Don't use loose substrate. So your bearded dragon is probably going to be out in the open and you'll see their little face every day. Oh my god, that was so embarrassing. But with your skink, you probably won't be able to sit down and just watch them in their enclosure. Instead, any kind of interaction you want to have with them, they'll probably have to be out. So if you are thinking about getting a blue tongue skink, definitely think about these pros and cons to reevaluate your decision. Now, in my opinion, I do not regret Malem at all. He was a little bit different than when I expected a blue tongue skink to act and all of that. But honestly, I love Malem so much. He may not love me a lot, but I do not regret my blue tongue skink. And I truly think if you're ready and you really want one, go for it. They are amazing. They're super duper fun pets as long as you find the pros outweigh the cons, and in my opinion, they definitely do. So if you have any more pros and cons, definitely leave it down in the description in case you do have a blue tongue skink, and talk about your experience and if you regret your skink or not. So if you guys like this video, make sure you check out other videos of mine. I'll have a few linked in the description. And if you guys really like my reptile videos and educational videos, let me know, because I'm trying to kind of balance out between all the fun and quirky shit I do versus the more educational, straightforward videos. So if you guys have any opinions, definitely leave them down in the comments below. Or if you want to be more direct, you can send me a direct message on Instagram at scoopingpoop. If you like this video, definitely leave a like, and also please subscribe. Please. If you want to subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you know whenever my next videos are uploaded. But I typically upload every single Monday and Thursday, but the times are a little bit different. It's like whenever I wake up and click upload. So make sure you turn on the notification bell so you will know. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys being here, and I'll see you next time I post a video. Bye! Jesus has